Welcome to Access Academy. It's National Braille Literacy Month, and what better way to celebrate than by hosting a two-part webinar series this month featuring the APH product Braille Brain. We begin with Braille Brain 101, Introduction to Units, Lessons, and Navigation. I know there is so much that we are going to dig in and learn today, and our presenters are ready to go and be able to share with you everything that you want to know about Braille Brain.
Hello, everyone. There we go. I think when you did the pop out that it took away my control. So, hello, getting to the presenters. So we have with us, I'll let Cheryl, you introduce yourself first.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Cheryl Kamei-Hannon, and I am here from Cal State University, Los Angeles as a faculty member in the Personnel Preparation Program for teachers of students with visual impairments, joining you for this presentation about Braille Brain.
And my name is Sarah Welch. So I work here at American Printing House for the Blind. I'm on the Braille technology team. I'm one of the product managers. I'm half of the team. And we do a variety of products, anywhere from our refreshable Braille displays to Braille Brain, but not currently the Monarch. That's a different team. So thank you all for being here today, especially the 67% that have never heard of Braille Brain. This is a fantastic place for you to be. So going over our learning objectives for the day, and I'll read these out. So first, understand the purpose, structure, and major components of Braille Brain, including units, lessons, and learning paths. Then, identify how instructors, paraprofessionals, and learners can access and navigate key features of Braille Brain. And finally, demonstrate how to begin using an introductory lesson or unit within their instructional planning. And these are just kind of broad overview. But please, at any time, if you have any questions, enter them into the chat. I do, of course, have like a set list of things I'd like to get through, but your questions can help guide if there's specific things we want to talk more about, because if you have a question, we're here to answer. And I will be monitoring the chat as best as I can. If I missed your question, we'll try to get back to it. So, introduction to Braille Brain. What is Braille Brain? So, just the very quick snippets. If you remember nothing else from the presentation today, these are the top things to remember. So first off, it's free. Always a good thing to denote there, because that's not always true in this field. A lot of things cost a lot of money. So what it is it's website based, and it is free for anyone to use across the world. And essentially, you can use it to learn Braille. It is fully accessible, so you can use it with a screen reader. You can use a refreshable Braille display. There are some lessons and whatnot that use audio, and we'll talk a little bit more about that future in the slides. But there are ways to print that text out. So we've tried to make it as well-rounded as we can for the learners. As far as the type of Braille, so it covers UEB literary, math, and Nemeth. Of course, the US, we decide state by state which Braille code to do. So we want to make sure to cover both, just to make sure everyone can get the learning that they need. And specific to note that it is designed for learners with existing literacy skills. So this can sometimes be a little bit confusing. So what this means is, for instance, if you're starting out as a young kid and you're just going to school for the first time, you'll want to be learning your literacy skills, like how to read, phonics, and all of that jazz is necessary for learning how to read and your literacy. So you would find that in some curriculums for Braille, such as Building on Patterns, which is a fantastic curriculum. So Braille Brain teaches Braille, but doesn't teach those literacy components. So you need to be sure to cover that if you are starting out with a learner that's just beginning school. And we'll get into that a little bit more later, but those are just the very quick brief. And Cheryl, please feel free to interrupt at any time if you want to add more. I know a lot, but Cheryl's definitely an expert and has been with this for a long time. So just briefly looking at the website, when you go to the first page of Braille Brain, it'll take you to the home page. And on that, you will encounter a header. This header is found on every page on Braille Brain. So if you ever get lost, you can just go back to your header and navigate to where you want to be on the website. So on the screen, we have a screenshot of the header, which is the logo for Braille Brain, which is like a stylized brain with the words Braille Brain underneath it. And then on the header itself, we have a number of links. And these are the different sections of Braille Brain. So we have the home page, then we have UEB Foundation, Assessments in parentheses, UEB Advanced, Nemeth and Use 6-dot entry. An important thing to note about 6-dot entry, if you're not familiar with that. So in Braille, if you're inputting Braille, you can input Braille using your QWERTY keyboard. So that's your standard keyboard layout in the US. If you use your 6 home row keys, SDF JKL, typically most keyboards can support that. You might come across a couple that don't. So if you do encounter that, try a different keyboard first. But that is how you can input Braille onto this website. So that's something that if you're not as familiar with learning Braille, might be a little bit unfamiliar. So on the home page itself, you'll find instructions and then an About Braille Brain. So the About Braille Brain goes into a lot of the history and some more of the background to Braille Brain and what has led to get to this point. And the instructions are also if you're wanting to know more about how to utilize Braille Brain. So let's get into some of the history of Braille Brain. And then we'll talk more about actual Braille Brain itself.
So I'm here to talk a little bit about how this project got started and where its roots grew from. So first, we were initially funded under a U.S. Department of Education grant, the RSA Braille Training Program grant, which is listed here on this slide. This program offered funding to develop training materials specifically to support Braille instruction and the students who are learning to read in Braille. So this program originally was designed by a teacher of students with visual impairments here in San Diego, California. And she came to me back in about 2018 with this course that was already somewhat put together. She had designed it in Schoology, and she created because many of her paraprofessionals and family members wanted to learn Braille, but were not finding curriculum that was useful to them to be able to learn Braille that was online. And so she shared that curriculum with me, and we wrote for this particular grant, and we were funded. So then her Schoology class was evolved into the current APH website for Braille Brain that we have here today. So that TVI's name is Kimberly Blackwell. And I definitely want to highlight her because she was the brain behind the Braille Brain content. She wrote all of the content in both the UEB Foundation course and the Nemeth Code course, which eventually turned also into content for the UEB Advanced course, which covers the content for UEB math and science notation. In addition to this background, we also featured content from a long time ago grant. Some of you may have remembered the iBraille Challenge and the Braille Challenge mobile app. We brought some of the content over from that and also the Reading and Writing Adventure Time apps into our assessments. So in 2025, we were able to upload all of the content for the assessments. That includes sub-skills for reading and writing from grades pre-K all the way up through 12th grade. And that content came over from the Reading and Writing Adventure Time app. So what we have now in Braille Brain today is a combination of Kimberly Blackwell's courses on learning the Braille code, in addition to reading and writing assessments that came over from Reading and Writing Adventure Time.
So a lot of history there. So you've mentioned a lot of the key people, but we also have some pictures of them as well. So this is Kim Blackwell. Is there anything else you would like to add to that, Cheryl?
A little bit more about Kimberly Blackwell. So she's a TVI in San Diego, California, but also I think it would be okay for me to share this. She's a native, not well, she's a Braille reader herself. So she has learned to read Braille later in life because of her own vision compensatory needs. And she is a tactile reader and definitely has experienced reading from the perspective of having to learn it to be her primary mode of communication as well.
And then, of course, Cheryl. Anything else to say about yourself or moving on?
I don't think so. Moving on.
Well, you're very instrumental. We're glad to have you, Cheryl.
Thank you. And Gina also was on both of the projects, starting with the Reading and Writing Adventure Time. She is a teacher of students with visual impairments, also out here in Southern California. And she helped with a lot of the proofreading and the editing of the content in both platforms. She also is an adjunct professor at Cal State University Los Angeles, as well as Portland State University, and has taught the Braille training course for both of these two institutions. So she has some experience in training teachers, future teachers, to also learn Braille.
So on this page, we have some additional content authors listed here, and these are all also listed online on the Braille Brain website itself.
So the content that was developed primarily for the reading assessments that are in Braille Brain were developed by a team of individuals, some of whom are professional writers, and also some of whom are visually impaired and Braille readers, and also several researchers and TVIs who all contributed to the development of the passages and the writing dictation exercises that you will find in the assessment section of Braille Brain.
So that was a lot of information, but sort of a brief overview of some of the history of Braille Brain. I think we touched on this briefly, but as far as how APH got involved, we have been working with Cheryl and Gina primarily directly on being the host for all of this material that Cheryl has been working on with all these other collaborators. And so we're excited to continue on and make sure that people have access to all this wonderful material. So what are some of the sections in Braille Brain? We briefly talked about these earlier when we were talking about the homepage or the header. So if we look first at the UEB Foundation, it's the first section in Braille Brain. And so this is kind of like your introduction to UEB literacy Braille, literary Braille, I should say. So it has 21 units, and it ranges anywhere from just the initial, the Braille alphabet, so what is A, what is B, all the way up to contractions. If you're not familiar with Braille, basically Braille is not a language, but it's a code way to write a language. And if you were just to do, you know, A is this, B is this, it gets very long. It takes a lot more space to write than a, we compare it to the same length of passage in print. So they have come up with a series of contractions or abbreviations, another way to think of it, to make things shorter, just space-wise, so it's faster and easier to read. So, for instance, instead of having like, you know, THE, the being 3 different letters, there's a contraction where it would just be basically 1 letter space. So 1 set of the Braille cell to make it. And there's a whole list of those. So this is where typically beginners should start if you don't have any background in Braille. And the units have different activities, including reading workout and writing workout. So if we look at an example of a reading workout, and on the screen, I do have a screenshot of an example, but this is just pulled directly from the website. So it might be a little bit hard to read, but you can go look at a lesson yourself. So at the top of the page, when you look at a reading workout, it'll give you the word count. So for this particular example, it tells us the word count is 75. Then you encounter start button. So you would press start, and then you would start reading. And this has a series of lines of sim braille, so simulated braille. And of course, if you have it connected to a braille display, it would come up on that. And then at the end, there is a button to select for reading complete. So you would press that once you're done reading the passage or your learner's done reading the passage. And you would encounter a text box to input the number of errors. So if there was 2 errors, you put in 2. If there was none, you put in 0. And then based on that and the time it logged from when you press start to when you press reading complete, it'll come up with your words per minute, the correct words per minute, and the accuracy percentage. And you do also have a place where you can download the Braille if you want to emboss a hard copy, because that's better for some people, and to download the answers as well, which is more applicable in some areas than this. And again, please feel free if you have any questions to ask in the chat. I know this is a lot of information at once if you've never encountered Braille Brain before. So UEB Advanced. So this is primarily more math-related topics. So we've also mentioned Nemeth as well. If you're not as familiar with Braille, so some of the history. So originally in the United States, we used a different Braille code, eBay, which was English Braille American Edition. And within that particular code set, it was literary Braille, so you could like read books, but there originally was not a way to do math. So in the 1970s, there was a guy, Nemeth came along with his last name, and he developed a code set of how to write math. So Nemeth is a way to represent math in Braille. Since then, we've moved over to UEB Braille, which is Unified English Braille. And that particular code set has a way to write math directly in that code set. So they're kind of 2 competing ways to write math. There's not necessarily one's better than the other. They're just different. Different states have different guidelines on which one to use, but we have both supported. So use what's best for you. Oh, I do see a question. Is Braille Brain accessible with Chromebox? Yes, it should be accessible with all screen readers. If you do encounter an issue, though, do please let us know, and we can determine if that was like a one-off bug or something we can do to fix on our end. So going back to the UEB Advanced, so it is the way to do the UEB math. It has advanced topics. So it has 13 units altogether, and typically the pattern is a lesson followed by multiple choice practice. And it includes topics such as complex fractions, sine, cosine, and tangent. So moving on to Nemeth, which is the other way to represent math in Braille. And it has 21 units. And again, it is typically a lesson followed by multiple choice questions. It includes topics such as Nemeth Code switch indicators, spatial math, and set notation. So pretty much every topic is represented in both the UEB math or the Nemeth. So if you're choosing one or the other, you're not missing anything. So UEB Foundation Assessment, and this is when Cheryl's been helping with us lately. So it can be used by teachers to inform them of learner skills, and it is sorted into reading levels from pre-kindergarten to grade 12, and that's based on reading level, not necessarily grade level. So for instance, if I was reading at an 8th grade level, I'm older than an 8th grader, but I would still use the 8th grade reading list because that's the reading level that I'm at. It contains long passages, short passages, word lists, dictation, and multiple choice. And we'll get into a little bit as far as what those are. So word lists. So it has, when you enter it, at the top of the screen, when you go into that particular word list for that lesson, it'll tell you what level you're at. So our example screenshot on this one is PKA, so it'd be pre-kindergarten, and it tells us the word count is 15. And like our reading exercises earlier, you'll also have a place to click start, and then a place to end, and then calculate how many you got. Sources for these, which are also listed on the Braille Brain website, include a variety of things, including Fried's word list of high frequency words, the New Jersey tiered system of support sample phonics, word analysis scope and sequence, the Wilson reading system, as well as the middle school vocabulary list and the secondary vocabulary list. Cheryl, do you want to talk about those at all?
So the way that the assessments are set up is to be very similar to a reading inventory. The word list may be used to give you a very quick snapshot of the grade level or reading level of the student's abilities. These sources were used, the Fry's list, mainly for our earlier list, starting at pre-K, going up to about third and fourth grade, while we transitioned from the more phonetic-based approach to multisyllabic and also content vocabulary words, starting in about fifth, sixth, and moving in through middle school and high school. We started to pull from the middle school vocabulary list and secondary vocabulary lists. So you will see a combination of high frequency words and also phonics-based words and moving into academic content words. One of the reasons why these assessments are really important in determining your reading intervention is because with Braille readers, we oftentimes see different skill sets depending on when a person begins to learn Braille and what skills they come into learning Braille with. So for example, early on, Sarah talked about how if you are a preschooler or kindergarten learning Braille, then the skill sets that you need to have accompanying them are things that are reading based, such as your phonological awareness and your phonics skills. Yet, if you are an older adult and have previously been reading print, you may learn Braille differently. For example, if you are a sighted learner who has learned the Braille code, you may have learned first with your alphabet, then your alphabet contractions, then perhaps your strong contractions like SH, TH, CH. This is a very different sequence than what you might learn if you were in preschool or kindergarten, where you might start to learn what we call consonant vowel consonant words, which are like cat, where it starts with a consonant, has a short vowel sound, and then another consonant. And that's because in our early readers, we're teaching them the ability to map sounds onto symbols. So it's a very different sequence, scope and sequence. Braille Brain was originally developed for our readers who already have a literacy medium, but the assessments will help you tease apart where a student may be within their literacy continuum. So it does start all the way down at pre-K. However, the intervention may differ depending on the results of your assessment. So the word list may be used first to establish a reading level, and then you can move on into your short passages, which I believe Sarah's going to talk about next.
So long and short passages, kind of a similar layout to the ones we've seen before. So you have at the top, it tell you the reading level. In this case, the example is from Atos 2.3. Then you have the word count, a start button. Then you find the passages in simulated Braille, and then a reading complete. So the whole, both of them use the Atos readability scale. All of these passages, like Cheryl was saying, come from a team of educational consultants. And typically there are 5 comprehension questions for each passage aligned to Common Core state standards.
Just to add to this, the difference between the short passages and long passages are, as noted in the title, the length of the passage. So short passages tend to be 1 or 2 sentences, definitely under 100 words. many of the short passages in the early elementary are within the range of, say, 10 to 25 words. The reason why we have both is because the short passages will allow you to test out the different conditions. You may, for example, want to compare how a student reads using a Braille display in comparison to hard copy Braille. You also may want to establish differences, perhaps for a learning media assessment, where you want to test out differences using technology and print and perhaps Braille. So you can use the short passages to make those comparisons without having the lengthy long passages. The second reason why we have the short passages is because for some of our students who are reading at very slow rates, the amount of stamina that you need in order to complete a long passage can sometimes be pretty grueling. When we tested these passages out using the iBraille challenge materials and the reading and writing adventure time materials, some of our students were reading anywhere between 5 and 10 words per minute. The long passages were taking them anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. So in terms of stamina and instructional content, if your student is taking 45 minutes to read a passage, then you may not be able to get to the actual instruction that you're hoping to get to because of that slower reading rate. So the short passages allow you to have another way of testing reading speed without over assessing your students. We do caution you in terms of wanting to test out the differences between using short passages and long passages in your learning media assessments and in your evaluation. You probably want to test out long passages and establish stamina and what it would look like if a student needed to keep up with their peers in the medium that you're testing. So you have both available, and they are there for two different reasons, many or a couple of different reasons, so that you can test out those differences.
Thank you, Cheryl. Looks like there's currently no other questions in the chat currently. So if we look at another aspect of our assessments is dictation. So this is one of the first times that we're encountering some of the audio problems that I mentioned earlier. So at the top of the particular dictation exercise that you choose, you'll find the level and the title for it. So I pulled a screenshot from the 6th grade writing dictation assessment, and this one's called the millipede. Right under that, you'll find a button where you can download text versions of audio problems. And under that, you'll find question 1 with a play button to play the audio for that, with a text box for the answer, going on down through all of the questions there. So these test spelling and progressively increases in difficulty, as well as the upper levels include sentences and short passages. And the writing dictation is leveled according to Common Core standards.
This is one of my favorite parts of the assessment is the dictation exercises. It allows you to look at how students engage in writing tasks. I don't know that we have great assessments other than this for things like this. And I found that the data to be really useful in comparing the differences between decoding and encoding. So for some of our students, they may be able to read a word and decode it, but when it comes to spelling that same word, they may find it a little bit more difficult. So the dictation exercises allow you to look more specifically and in depth at spelling, but because they're dictation exercises, they also include things like grammar, such as punctuation, the use of periods, commas, and those types of things that you'll see, capital letters, you'll see those in dictation of sentences that you won't necessarily see in a spelling test. So you can also test out the student's knowledge of symbols for punctuation, capitalization, and so forth. The other reason why I love the dictation, it was so much fun to do the dictation. We actually hired professional actors and actresses to read these prompts. So what you will hear are two different voices. You will hear a person who prompts you about how to do this task, and then a person who will read the sentence. So you'll hear something like Braille the sentence, and then another person will read the sentence. But because it's dictated, we also will feed some of the important information, such as use digits to write the number or use words to write the number. But from a teacher's standpoint, you can test out the ability to write digits versus write out whole numbers using words instead. So we can test those as well when we look at the answers here. There is a question about, is this only web-based? And the answer is yes. You do have to have internet connection to be able to fill in the prompts using the text edit fields. However, for most of these assessments, there is a downloadable answer. So you can download the text formats for these and import them into another format. So for example, in the short passages, you'll be able to download both a BRF file to hard copy Braille it or a text TXT file, which you can then import into whatever format is best for you, Microsoft Word, Google Docs, perhaps your Braille note taker, however it's easiest for you to also access that same prompt. So in that sense, I've had folks compare different media. Because they have the TXT, they're then able to put it into their Microsoft Word. They can then test digital print format by increasing the different font sizes, etc., to be able to do learning media assessments and compare both the print, the digital format, and the Braille format.
And something I think that's good to add to that that I don't think we touched on earlier in the what's next for Braille Brain. So we've been working on a way to do quote unquote certificates. I'm saying that in quote because it's basically they're not like a credit anywhere. It's not going to give you like, credit in your class, but they're going to be a way that you can show what you scored on each thing that you completed. So for instance, if I did this dictation and I got 100%, then I could print out a certificate with my name on it that's populated and what I scored. Important caveats with this is all of that data is stored locally on your device, so we don't have access to it. But what that means is if I'm working on my laptop and then I switch to a desktop or I switch to my phone, then that data is not going to be moving over it. It's unless you have the browsers connected, but it's on that direct device. Likewise, if you change what web browser you're using, you also won't have the data going through. So that's important to know. And also, you don't want to delete your cookies. But those are coming soon. It's kind of important to know. Like we said before, Braille Brain is completely free. So if we look after dictation, and that was a great question, thank you for that. The last aspect of the assessments are multiple choice. So these are additional questions developed to test knowledge of rules governing specific Braille contractions. The Braille contractions are controlled and aligned with grade level expectations for vocabulary and sight words. So our example screenshot on the screen here is third grade A multiple choice questions because there's more than one option to choose. So this is showing that you chose the A version. So it has question 1, which is worth 10 points. The question is represented in SimBraille. And then you have 4 options underneath that for answers that are also represented in SimBraille.
Okay, so a little bit about the history behind multiple choice and why this becomes important. This project, or this portion of the project, was attached to the Braille Challenge contest that is currently being run by Braille Institute. So if you're familiar with Braille Institute's Braille Challenge, then you may be familiar with the multiple choice section. So a lot of this content was originally written to evolve the Braille Challenge into a digital format. So it mimics some of what you might see on the Braille Challenge multiple choice section. But what we did is we attached this multiple choice section specifically to the Common Core standards, and this is where it deviates from the Braille Challenge slightly. What we wanted to do was test not just knowledge of grammar and spelling that you would see in a typical K-12 setting that are addressed in the expanded core, but we also wanted to test differences in the Braille code. So what I mean by that is if you were to take the word brother, B-R-O-T-H-E-R, you have to question whether or not you would use a THE contraction, an ER contraction, a TH contraction, or some variation of those contractions. The problem with testing this out using refreshable Braille displays is that the inherent translator that is attached to the Braille device will oftentimes change the transcription and make it accurate. So if you write the word brother incorrectly and you use the wrong contraction, the Braille translator will oftentimes fix it. And so you won't necessarily know that a student is not understanding the Braille rules. So the multiple choice section then specifically teases out Braille rules in a way that we may not necessarily be able to tease apart in other testing formats that are meant for print readers. This is specifically made for Braille and tests Braille rules. And there are questions related to the use of contractions, the rules behind contractions, the rules behind formatting, and special symbols that print does not have. For example, the use of a .6 indicator or the use of formatting indicators that print doesn't have, the multiple choice section will test out. And that will inform your instruction because then you're able to tease apart perhaps is this related to reading or is this related to Braille? And the need to be able to teach specific indicators that are used in Braille.
Oh, we have a couple of questions in chat here. Um, so do you recommend we use the student's grade level for multiple choice or start at the beginning to assess their knowledge and find where they eventually get more than half wrong?
You know, that's a really good question. I almost feel like it depends on what types of skills they're coming into this assessment arena with. So for example, if you're coming into this with a background, a literacy background in print, then you may perhaps be getting some of the Common Core questions correct, but maybe some of the Braille questions incorrect, in which case you might be able to jump into it in the middle and specifically address the Braille aspects of literacy. But if you are coming at this as a dual reader or perhaps a reader who is learning to read with Braille, you probably are going to want to start at it in an earlier grade. So kind of just depends on what the students in literacy skills are coming into the assessment. And you can definitely use this assessment to tease apart some of those questions. And then we did have another person in the chat window ask for a demonstration of some of the sections.
Okay. I can work on pulling up the website. So Cheryl, you've mentioned a little bit, but do you want to talk more about the future work you're doing with the assessment sections?
So unfortunately, the assessments were the part 2 of the Braille training program. We were originally funded in 2024 for a continuation of the project for Braille Brain. However, that was a project that was discontinued under the Trump administration. So in August of 2025, we were notified that the Braille training grant will not be continued. We're currently in the process of rewriting into another competition for refunding of the Braille training grant. If we are funded, then we'll be able to develop the guidelines for using this assessment tool. The guidelines are pretty much written. What we want to do now is provide professional development in how to use this assessment tool, how it may align with perhaps some of the learning media assessment data that you're gathering, and how it may be used as an informal reading inventory as part of that learning media assessment. So if the Braille training grant is funded, that's where we're heading, is to develop that professional development to be offered to teachers who would like to use this tool and to also develop some fidelity guidelines so that folks are getting valid data from the assessment tool.
Thank you for all of that. I'm going to try to get this pulled up. Let's see. I think that should be sharing. Yeah, there we go. Cheryl, is there a particular part of this you want me to look at, or because I could ask the chat that as well.
I think as we demonstrated, we shared with you actually four different aspects of Braille Brain. The first is the UEB Foundations course. The second is the UEB Advanced, the Nemeth course, and then the assessment. So I think starting with UEB Foundations, when you take a look at what we have in the Braille Brain UEB Foundation course, I want you to think of this as professional development for folks to learn how to learn Braille. And so it is set up to be loosely aligned with some textbooks that we use in personnel preparation programs, such as the Ashcroft book. What you're going to see here is a scope and sequence of how many print literate folks learn Braille. You'll notice that it starts with the Braille alphabet and numbers. It moves on into alphabetic word signs, strong contractions. There are math symbols embedded, such as math signs of operation and comparison. Then we get into single cell punctuation. You will notice as you look through all of these units that there is a scope and sequence to how these contractions are introduced based on their types of contractions, and lessons build from one to another. This is meant to start at the beginning and for you to move sequentially through the unit. If you start in a later unit, like let's say you start in unit 7, you will have to have the prerequisite knowledge of units 1 through 6 in order to be successful in unit 7. However, if you are familiar with Braille and you forget a particular symbol, it's really helpful to just drop into one of these lessons, because what you'll see is all of the contractions in the group, the SimBraille font, so you can visually see what that symbol looks like, and then several different examples of how that symbol is used in text or sentences. This same format of introducing the symbol and then providing examples is used in every single lesson in the Foundations course, Advanced course, and in the Nemeth course. The other thing that you'll see if you go to the Foundations course is following the introduction of a symbol are several different activities. So you'll see reading workout, or you'll see activity. And if you want to just choose one, you can see that there's different types of activities. The reading workout isolates the symbols that you learned in all of the lessons leading up to this. So this is unit 5, provides you with SimBraille, allows you to time yourself in reading. You can also input any miscues that you might have in your reading errors and get your calculation of both accuracy and words per minute. In addition to that, we also have activities such as multiple choice and fill in the blank. So if you go to another one of the activities, let's choose I don't know, strong groupings, practice, unit 7, or yeah, there we go. So here we have a combination of multiple choice and fill in the blank. And so you can read the prompt, you can fill in the blank. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's a submit button. And when you submit that, it will actually score it. A lot of faculty in personnel preparation programs who are teaching Braille are using this as one activity to supplement learning the code, in addition to writing using a combination of Perkins Braille Writer and PerkyDuck and those types of transcription softwares in testing their students and learning the code. But this is a nice way, originally, if you think about how it was conceptualized for parents, family members, siblings, and paraprofessionals to learn Braille. this offers the practice as well as the activities to score themselves. Does it work with the Monarch? Yes. We do have one of our APH testers is testing it with the Monarch. So this is how all of the courses are set up. If we drop into the assessment, and if there's, by the way, a particular thing that you want to see, just drop in the chat window what you want to see. I love our dictation. So if you want to just go to dictation grade 1A, that's the easiest one. And enable sound if you haven't. And then let's just listen to the dictation. We'll do question 1 and question 5.
Braille the word.
People.
And you can replay it. If you didn't hear it, you can replay the audio. And so then you just drop in to the, whoops, the screen switched to the slide. You can drop in the SimBraille answer. Braille the word people.
Oh, you want me actually?
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, I haven't tested. Okay.
There we go. Your
I actually haven't
keyboard.
tested my keyboard. So apparently the keyboard I'm on right now doesn't support 6-key entry.
That's important to note. But I think if you just press P on your keyboard, it should work. There we go. All right, and let's drop down to number 5 so we can hear the prompt.
Braille the sentence.
It is very fun. Are you able to hear on your own saying? Because I can't hear on my end. So
It is very fun. And so you'll notice that between prompt 1 and then getting to prompt 5, we've scaffolded from one word all the way to a complete sentence. So now when we're typing in, it is very fun, we're expecting to see the capitalization indicator. It is very fun. And then the period at the end of the sentence with the contractions that are also used. If you click on check answers, we haven't put in responses for all of the questions, but what you will see is you will see that in number 1, we got it correct. And number 2, we got them incorrect. If you got it correct, it's not going to give you the SimBraille font. But if you got it incorrect, then you also are given the SimBraille font so that you can go back and study if you need to and retake that particular prompt. And if you scroll all the way down to it is very fun, you'll see that there's our full sentence with our dot 6 and our period at the end of the sentence.
So Tammy had a good question. I'm new to Braille. My student is just learning letters. Is this something I can complete to just keep it fresh and practice?
Yes, absolutely. That's exactly the purpose for the Braille Brain, is to help folks along the way and support their students. So absolutely, please, it's free, it's available. All of the data will be stored locally on your computer, and you can just keep moving forward through the lessons at your own pace.
Just to feed off the question earlier about does Braille Brain work with Monarch? In general, it should work with any Braille display as long as the Braille display can go to a web browser. So a lot of options out there.
And another note, this is maybe a bit technical, but it's super important to note, is that underlying all of the answers in Braille Brain is what we call ASCII code. And the reason why that's really important is because we need to tease out the differences in code-based errors versus spelling errors or contraction errors. And because it is completely driven by that ASCII code, your refreshable Braille displays are not going to auto-correct things, but you'll actually see the text as the student writes the text. And that goes for all of them, including the dictation.
So Cynthia had a question. Will you be adding new questions and reading passages periodically? That's so we're hoping to. So part of the grant that Shara was talking about that got canceled last year included basically using different generative stuff to make basically endless passages and whatnot to go through. And unfortunately, that grant got canceled. And like Cheryl said, we're looking at new grants potentially and under other funding sources, if I can talk. So that's on the radar. We want to do that, and hopefully we can find a good source to help pay for that. So. Oh, Shelly, can you go back and look at scores after you completed a unit and moved on? So that gets back to your data is tied locally to your device. And that'll be part of what's under the certificates when they come out, which should be really soon. On there, you'll be able to see like how many times you've done a particular thing. What have you been scoring each time? So as long as you stay on the same device, same web browser, you should be able to.
What I would recommend once the certificates go live is that every time you complete something, you download your certificate. And we do have about 3 more minutes, so maybe one last question, Sarah?
Well, it's been bugging me how I answered about refreshable braille display, so I will add a caveat onto that because that's been bugging me. You can also, if you're using a refreshable braille display, is basically just the display for whatever electronic device you have connected. You should be able to use essentially any display. So wanted to add that on. So. Seems like some comments of people that are excited for the website, and we're excited for you to be excited. We want more people to know about this. Definitely spread the word. Like we said, free for anyone to use. So some good use cases we've seen is if you're an adult later in life wanting to learn Braille, maybe not as many resources, or if you're tangentially connected in the education system to wanting to learn Braille, this is a great resource for it.
This is a great resource, and we do not want this to be a well-kept secret here at APH. We want people to be aware and be accessing it. Can Braille copies of the questions for the passages be printed out too or embossed?
For most things, there is a button where you can download a copy of the document. And like Cheryl was saying, you can either emboss it from there or use it however you want. So.
Okay. So I'm going to put in here, as I had mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, today is the first out of 2 webinars that are on Braille Brain. And so I'm going to put into the chat here right now, just if you are interested and you are not aware that in a couple of weeks, we have another webinar, which is January 27th. And this one is supporting Braille literacy with Braille Brain. And this is advanced technical and application. So it just takes the learning one step further. That URL is in the chat if you have not seen it before and you want to make sure that you secure a seat and start receiving confirmation emails to remind you. I know that I need those gentle reminders. It is in there now.
And I pulled up back on the PowerPoint. So this information is on the PowerPoint as well if you downloaded the PowerPoint, but the contact information for Cheryl and myself. Again, my name is Sarah Welch. So my email is swelch, SWELCH at aph.org. And then Cheryl, do you want to read yours out?
And my contact information, I'm going to simplify it for what's showing on the slide to CKAMEIH at calstatela.edu. And I'll also drop it in the chat window.
So I know you briefly mentioned the chat window. If you are interested, there's a couple things that you're working on, Cheryl. So if you're wanting to take more part, specifically on the next thing coming for assessments, please shoot us an email and we'll keep you in the loop.